For centuries, people have asked, why did Jerusalem fall in 70 AD? Was it rebellion against Rome, divine judgment, or something more mysterious hidden beneath its ashes? Today, we'll uncover the untold story of how one city's destruction changed the world, and why its secrets still matter to every faith, every nation, and every era. In 70 AD, the unthinkable happened. Jerusalem, the holy city of three faiths, was surrounded, besieged, and set ablaze. The Second Temple, once believed to house the presence of God himself, was reduced to dust in memory. But this was more than just a military defeat. It was a turning point in human history, one that still defines religion, politics, and prophecy today. Join us as we journey through history's most haunting moment, the fall of Jerusalem, where faith met fire, empire met prophecy, and mystery met destiny. The story of Jerusalem's fall doesn't begin with the clash of swords or the burning of the temple. It begins decades earlier in the quiet simmer of tension beneath Roman rule. By the middle of the 1st century AD, Jerusalem was not just a city, it was a symbol. A city believed to be chosen by God, the beating heart of Jewish faith and identity. But to Rome, it was another restless province, a distant corner of an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. And in that corner, a storm was brewing. Rome had conquered Judea nearly a century before, and with conquest came heavy taxes, military presence, and an unrelenting demand for loyalty to the emperor. To the Jewish people, whose laws and traditions forbade idol worship, the Roman insistence on emperor worship was not just offensive, it was blasphemy. Every statue of Caesar, every Roman coin bearing his image, was a reminder that their holy land was no longer their own. In the streets of Jerusalem, resentment festered. Merchants cursed the taxes that drained their profits. Priests in the temple whispered about the corruption of their leaders, and zealots in the shadows dreamed of rebellion. The Romans ruled through local kings and governors, but even they were despised. Herod the Great, though he built magnificent structures, was seen as a puppet king loyal to Rome, not to God, and his successors did little to ease the people's anger. By 66 AD, the tension had reached a breaking point. The Roman governor, Gessius Florus, was notoriously cruel. When protests broke out over his greed and sacrilege, he responded with brutality, ordering the plunder of the temple treasury and the slaughter of innocent citizens. It was a spark in a room full of powder. The city erupted in rage. Jewish rebels seized control of Jerusalem, killing Roman soldiers and declaring open revolt. At first, it seemed impossible. How could a small province defy the might of Rome? But the rebels were driven by faith, not fear. They believed that God himself would fight on their side, that prophecy would protect them, that Jerusalem could never fall because it was holy. Across Judea, villages joined the uprising, ambushing Roman garrisons, proclaiming freedom. It wasn't just a war, it was a crusade born of desperation and divine conviction. But rebellion also revealed the divisions within. Not all Jews agreed on how to fight or even whether to fight at all. There were the zealots, fierce militants who saw no compromise with Rome as possible. There were the Sicarii assassins who struck down anyone they viewed as traitors, even fellow Jews. And then there were the Sadducees and Pharisees, religious groups torn between maintaining peace and preserving their traditions. Jerusalem, instead of uniting, fractured. Every faction believed it alone understood God's will, and every faction was willing to shed blood for it. Meanwhile, Rome watched. The Emperor Nero sent his best general, Vespasian, to crush the rebellion. With the discipline of the Roman legions and the experience of countless campaigns, he moved through Galilee, razing towns and slaughtering thousands. The rebel strongholds fell one by one: Jotapata, Gamla, and others, each leaving behind rivers of blood and echoes of defiance. One man, a captured Jewish commander named Josephus, predicted that Vespasian himself would become emperor. That prophecy would soon prove true, but first, Vespasian's mission had to be completed. Jerusalem had to be destroyed. Inside the city, the situation worsened. Refugees poured into Jerusalem, bringing tales of horror from the north. Food grew scarce, and paranoia grew thick. Zealot leaders turned on each other, looting supplies and burning storehouses in power struggles that would doom the city before the Romans even arrived. It was chaos, a city meant to be holy, tearing itself apart from within. Yet despite the madness, the people held on to hope. In the temple courts, prayers rose like smoke. The priests continued their sacrifices, the shofars still sounded, and the walls of Jerusalem still stood. To them, the city was eternal. The temple was God's dwelling. How could it ever fall? But outside those walls, the Roman war machine was closing in. Vespasian's son, Titus, took command of the legion's men hardened by years of conquest, engineers capable of turning mountains into fortresses. For them, Jerusalem was not just a rebel stronghold, it was a symbol of defiance that had to be erased. The political powder keg had finally exploded. What began as resistance to taxation had become a full-blown war for identity, faith, and survival. A small province had challenged the greatest empire the world had ever known, believing that heaven would intervene. The Romans saw rebellion, the Jews saw prophecy, and as both sides prepared for what would come next, neither could have imagined the scale of destruction that awaited Jerusalem. By the spring of 70 AD, Jerusalem was surrounded. The city that once stood as a beacon of faith had become the last stronghold of rebellion against the most powerful empire on earth. The Roman legions under Titus, son of Emperor Vespasian, encircled the holy city with tens of thousands of soldiers disciplined, relentless, and ready to crush the uprising once and for all. Inside those walls, chaos ruled. What was once the spiritual heart of a people had turned into a battleground of factions, starvation, and desperation. The siege of Jerusalem wasn't just a military campaign, it was a slow, suffocating nightmare. The Romans didn't storm the city immediately. They didn't need to. They built a ring of fortifications around it, cutting off every road, every escape route, every supply of food or water. The goal was simple: starve the city into surrender. And inside those walls, the suffering began. Jerusalem was overflowing with people. Pilgrims had come for the Passover festival, hoping to celebrate in peace. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a city of war. The population swelled far beyond what the city could sustain. Soon, food ran out, water grew scarce. The wealthy tried to hoard what little they had. The poor scavenged in the streets. Hunger gnawed at every household, and fear spread like disease. But even in their suffering, the people refused to give in. The zealots held firm, believing that God would never allow his city to fall. They manned the walls day and night, raining arrows and stones on the Roman camps below. Titus, however, was patient. He knew that time was on his side. Every day the defenders grew weaker. Every night the sound of weeping and hunger filled the city. Inside Jerusalem, things grew darker. The factions that had once fought Rome now turned on each other. The zealots clashed with the Sicarii, and rival warlords battled for control of the temple itself. They burned each other's granaries in acts of rage and pride, destroying the very food that could have sustained them. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, forced to choose sides or be branded traitors. The once sacred temple courts became the center of bloodshed, echoing with screams instead of prayers. As the weeks turned into months, the Romans tightened their grip. Titus ordered the construction of massive siege works towers, battering rams and catapults that hurled flaming stones over the walls. He commanded his engineers to build a wall completely around Jerusalem, 5 miles of fortifications, built in just 3 days. It was a message to the defenders. There would be no escape, no mercy, no way out. Inside, starvation reached its peak. Ancient historians describe horrors beyond imagination, people eating whatever they could find, even leather, straw, and refuse. Mothers wept over dying children, families turned against one another. The once proud city that had been the jewel of the East was now a tomb of the living. Yet still, the defenders refused to surrender. Every assault by the Romans was met with defiance. The Jewish fighters, though weakened, fought with desperate fury. They knew their city was doomed, but they also knew surrender meant slavery and humiliation. From the walls, they hurled insults and curses at the Roman soldiers. Some believed that the coming of the Messiah was near, that this suffering was a test of faith, that divine intervention would soon come to deliver them. But Titus had no interest in prophecy. He pressed forward. His men breached the outer walls, then the second, fighting block by block, street by street. Every step cost blood. The narrow alleys of Jerusalem turned into killing grounds. Roman shields clashed with Jewish daggers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The defenders retreated toward the Temple Mount, their last refuge, the one place they believed could never fall. The temple loomed above the city like a promise of hope. Its marble gleamed in the sunlight, its gold-covered facade shining even amidst the smoke of war. The priests continued their rituals, refusing to abandon their sacred duties even as fire and death closed in. To them, the temple was eternal. The Romans could destroy the city, but surely not the house of God. Titus, however, saw the temple differently. It was the heart of the rebellion, the symbol of resistance. He ordered his men to capture it, but not to destroy it. He wanted to preserve its beauty as a trophy of Rome's victory. Yet, in the chaos of the battle, that order was lost. A Roman soldier, acting on impulse, hurled a flaming torch through a doorway. The dry wood caught fire. In moments, flames raced through the temple courts. The defenders screamed in horror. The priests tried to save the sacred vessels, but the fire consumed everything. Gold melted and ran between the stones. The air filled with smoke and ash. The Romans, intoxicated by battle, ignored their commander's shouts to stop. They stormed the burning temple, slaughtering everyone inside. The most sacred place in the Jewish world was engulfed in fire. From his command post, Titus watched as the flames devoured what had once been the pride of Jerusalem. The city that had resisted him for months was crumbling, not just physically but spiritually. The people who had believed they were fighting for God were now witnessing what they could not comprehend, the destruction of his dwelling place. The siege of Jerusalem was no longer a battle between two armies. It had become something far greater, a confrontation between faith and empire. Prophecy and power, the eternal and the mortal, the flames that consumed the temple in 70 AD did more than destroy a building. They shattered the heart of an entire civilization. To the Jewish people, the Second Temple wasn't just a structure of stone and gold. It was the dwelling place of God Himself, the center of their world, the soul of their faith. Every prayer, every festival, every sacrifice had led to this place. And now it was burning. The fire spread quickly, feeding on the cedar beams and the fine linens that lined the inner chambers. The temple complex, once a place of music and prayer, was engulfed in chaos. Soldiers stormed the courts, their armor gleaming red from the reflection of the flames. The air filled with the screams of priests, the clash of steel, the crackle of collapsing roofs. The holy menorah, its 7 lamps, a symbol of divine light, was seized by Roman hands. The golden vessels, the altars, and even the sacred scrolls were looted or destroyed. As the inferno raged, people across the city saw the smoke rising over the mount and knew that something sacred was dying. Some tried to rush toward the temple, desperate to defend it or die within its walls, believing martyrdom might restore their honor before God. Others fled, broken, unable to comprehend how the holiest place on earth could be left to burn. For centuries, they had believed that the presence of the Almighty dwelled there, that as long as the temple stood, their covenant was unbroken. And yet, the fire kept spreading. Historians tell us that Titus himself did not intend for the temple to be destroyed. He wanted to claim it as a monument to Roman victory, to show the world that Rome could conquer even the God of Israel. But in the chaos of battle, his orders meant nothing. Once the fire started, the soldiers became uncontrollable. They tore down what they could not steal, slaughtered anyone they found hiding within the chambers, and pried gold from the walls as it melted from the heat. The great stones of the temple cracked and shifted under the force of the blaze. When morning came, nothing remained but smoke and ruin. The altar was buried beneath rubble. The veil that once separated the Holy of Holies, a place so sacred that only the high priest could enter once a year, was gone. The priests who had tended it lay dead among the ashes. The place where heaven and earth had once met was silent. For the people of Jerusalem, it was the unthinkable. Generations had lived and died for the temple. It was where King Solomon had once prayed, where prophets had spoken, where sacrifices had been made for the forgiveness of sins. Without it, the very foundation of their faith seemed to collapse. How could they worship without an altar? How could they seek forgiveness without sacrifice? How could they be God's chosen people when his house had been destroyed? Some said it was punishment, a divine judgment for corruption, rebellion, or the shedding of innocent blood. Others said it was prophecy fulfilled. The words of Jesus, spoken decades earlier, echoed in memory. Not one stone will be left upon another. To the early Christians, the destruction of the temple was a sign that a new covenant had begun. To the Jewish people, it was a wound that would never heal. As the fire died and the smoke thinned, the Romans moved through the ruins, claiming their prizes. The sacred treasures of the temple were carried away: the golden table, the trumpets, and the great menorah. They were paraded through the streets of Rome, celebrated as spoils of victory. The Arch of Titus still stands today, carved with the image of Roman soldiers carrying those treasures on their shoulders. What had once been sacred was now a trophy. But the loss of the temple wasn't just spiritual, it was cultural, political, and existential. The entire Jewish world had revolved around that one place. Every Jew, no matter how far from Jerusalem, had faced its direction when they prayed. Now there was only emptiness. The priesthood was gone. The sacrifices were gone. The center of worship had been erased. Those who survived the siege wandered in disbelief. Some were sold into slavery. Others were scattered across the empire. Families were separated, communities destroyed. The Jewish nation ceased to exist as a sovereign power. From the ashes of Jerusalem began a long exile, one that would shape the identity of a people for centuries to come. And yet, amidst the ruin, something remarkable began to take shape. Without the temple, worship could no longer depend on sacrifice. It turned inward towards study, prayer, and the preservation of law. Out of loss came adaptation. Out of silence came resilience. The destruction of the Second Temple marked not only the end of an era, but the birth of a new form of faith that would endure through centuries of exile and persecution. But in that moment, on that day in 70 AD, none of that was yet visible. All that could be seen was fire and smoke. All that could be heard were the echoes of cries and collapsing stones. The glory of Jerusalem was gone, and with it, a sense that the world itself had shifted. For those who stood among the ashes, it felt as if the divine presence had departed the earth. When the Second Temple burned in 70 AD, not everything perished in the flames. Among the chaos, legends were born, stories of treasures so sacred, so powerful that their disappearance would haunt the world for centuries. These were not ordinary riches. They were symbols of divine covenant: the golden menorah, the silver trumpets of the priests, the table of showbread, and perhaps even older relics whispered of in Scripture: the Ark of the Covenant, the tablets of Moses, and the sacred scrolls that contained the very words of God. What happened to them when Jerusalem fell? That question has never been answered, but its mystery has ignited imaginations and fueled searches across continents and centuries. The Roman legions that entered the burning temple carried out a brutal mission. They stripped the sanctuary of its wealth, prying gold from the walls, seizing sacred vessels, and looting anything that could be taken as a symbol of victory. Josephus, the Jewish historian who witnessed the destruction, described in detail how Titus's men took the treasures back to Rome years later. When Titus became emperor, a triumphal procession was held through the streets of the capital. The crowd cheered as soldiers marched beneath the Arch of Titus, carrying the golden menorah and the sacred table on their shoulders. To the Romans, these were spoils of conquest, proof that even the gods of other nations bowed before Rome. To the Jewish people, it was unbearable humiliation, the theft of their holiest objects. The menorah, with its 7 golden branches, became one of the most recognized symbols of that loss. Carved into the Arch of Titus, it remains visible even today. Frozen in stone, a painful reminder of a treasure taken from the temple and never returned. But where did it go after that? Some records suggest it was placed in the Temple of Peace in Rome, a grand repository for the empire's greatest plunder. Others say it was displayed in the imperial palace itself, a trophy to remind the Romans of their triumph over a stubborn people and their god. Then, centuries later, it vanished. The Roman Empire fell, invaders sacked its cities, and the trail went cold. The menorah disappeared from history, leaving behind only fragments of rumor and hope. Some believe it was seized by the Vandals when they sacked Rome in 455 AD and taken to Carthage, only to vanish again when the Byzantine general Belisarius conquered the city a century later. Others claim the sacred relics were secretly hidden by Jewish priests before the Romans ever entered the temple, concealed in underground chambers or tunnels deep beneath the city waiting to be found when the time was right. Jerusalem itself is riddled with mystery. Beneath the Temple Mount lies a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, many still unexplored. Ancient texts speak of priests who, sensing the city's doom, hid the sacred vessels and writings to protect them from desecration. Some researchers believe that within those hidden vaults may lie the lost treasures of the temple. Over the centuries, explorers, crusaders, and archaeologists have searched for them, each convinced they were on the brink of uncovering history's greatest secret. And then there is the most elusive relic of all, the Ark of the Covenant. By 70 AD, its location was already a mystery. Some say it was lost long before, during the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem centuries earlier. Others insist it had been hidden by the priests, passed down through generations of guardians. The Ark, said to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments and to represent the very presence of God, would have been the greatest treasure of all. If it survived the destruction of the temple, where could it have gone? Throughout history, countless legends have risen to answer that question. Some point to Ethiopia, where the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion claims to house the Ark to this very day, guarded by monks who never leave its side. Others suggest it was taken to the Judean desert, hidden in one of the caves that centuries later would yield the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are even stories of it being buried beneath the Temple Mount itself, resting beneath the foundations of what is now the Dome of the Rock. The Roman looting also carried away other items, scrolls, priestly garments, and possibly early records of sacred texts. Many of these may have been destroyed in fires or melted down and repurposed, their divine craftsmanship lost forever. Yet some scholars believe fragments survived, perhaps traded, hidden, or secretly preserved by Jewish families who refused to let their heritage vanish. The mystery of these relics has never ceased to capture the world's imagination. Crusaders in the Middle Ages scoured the Holy Land for them, believing that whoever possessed the lost temple treasures would hold divine favor and unimaginable power. The Knights Templar, the secretive order born in Jerusalem, were rumored to have found something beneath the Temple Mount, something so sacred that it changed the course of their destiny. Whether truth or legend, the story of the temple's lost treasures became a cornerstone of countless myths, inspiring explorers, conquerors, and scholars alike. But beyond the allure of gold and relics lies something deeper, a sense of longing, a search for connection to the divine that humanity has never stopped pursuing. The menorah, the ark, the sacred vessels, they are more than lost artifacts. They are symbols of faith enduring through destruction, of light surviving through darkness. Their loss is not only physical but spiritual, a reminder that even when sacred things vanish, their meaning endures in the hearts of those who remember. The fall of Jerusalem scattered the treasures of the temple across the world, both literally and metaphorically. Some may lie buried beneath centuries of earth, waiting to be discovered. Others may never be found. But the mystery remains alive, carried in every whisper of prophecy, every rumor of discovery, every hope that one day the light of the temple will shine again. From the moment the first stone of the second temple was laid, there were whispers that one day it would fall. Prophets had warned that if the people turned from their covenant, if corruption took root in the heart of the holy city, Jerusalem would be destroyed. For centuries, those warnings were dismissed as distant fears. But in 70 AD, when the flames rose and the city burned, it seemed as though prophecy itself had come alive. Many saw the fall of Jerusalem not as a mere act of war, but as divine judgment, a moment when heaven's patience finally ran out. The idea of Jerusalem's destruction being foretold runs deep in both Jewish and Christian tradition. Long before the Roman legions marched upon the city, the prophets had spoken of coming disaster. Jeremiah had warned that God would allow foreign nations to conquer Jerusalem if the people abandoned his ways. Centuries later, Ezekiel spoke of a vision in which the glory of the Lord departed from the temple, a chilling symbol of divine withdrawal. And in the first century, voices once again rose, echoing those ancient warnings. Among them was a man named Jesus of Nazareth. Decades before the siege, as he stood looking upon the great stones of the temple, he said, "Do you see all these things? Truly, I tell you, not one stone will be left upon another. Everyone will be thrown down." His words shocked his followers. To them, the temple was indestructible. How could such a thing ever happen? But when it did, his prophecy became one of the most haunting in history. To early Christians, the destruction of the temple was not just tragedy. It was the fulfillment of divine foretelling, a sign that an old covenant had ended and a new one had begun. To the Jewish people, the same event carried an entirely different weight. The destruction of the temple was not a symbol of renewal, but of grief and punishment. Many rabbis and scholars of the time believed it was a consequence of internal strife, brother against brother, zealot against zealot, sin within the holy city itself. Ancient writings speak of the sins that led to the fall: baseless hatred, moral decay, pride, and betrayal. The people had turned on each other, and in doing so, they had invited judgment. The Roman army, they believed, was merely the instrument through which divine justice was carried out. There were also strange omens reported before the fall. Josephus, the historian who witnessed the siege, wrote of visions and signs that appeared in the skies above Jerusalem. He described chariots and soldiers seen riding among the clouds, and a mysterious voice heard in the temple saying, "Let us depart from here." To those who heard it, it was as if the divine presence, the Shekinah, had abandoned the city before its destruction. Whether these accounts were literal, symbolic, or shaped by fear, they became woven into the story of Jerusalem's doom as signs that heaven itself had turned away. Some stories tell of a prophet wandering the streets of Jerusalem years before the siege, crying out day and night, "Woe to the city, woe to the temple, woe to the people." He was beaten, mocked, and imprisoned, yet he never stopped. When the Romans finally breached the walls, that same prophet was said to have been struck down by a stone, his final words echoing through the smoke. To believers, he was another witness to prophecy fulfilled, a voice no one had listened to until it was too late. The destruction of the temple raised questions that echoed for generations. Was this truly punishment, or simply the result of human pride and rebellion? Was it fate, or was it choice? Some saw it as divine retribution for defying Rome and rejecting peace. Others saw it as the price of faith, a test meant to purify and strengthen a people who had strayed. In either case, it became clear that Jerusalem's fall was not just a physical event, it was a spiritual reckoning. In the aftermath, the survivors struggled to make sense of what had happened. The rabbis, scattered and broken, began to rebuild faith without a temple, turning their focus to the Torah and the power of prayer. They taught that the sacrifices once made at the altar could now be offered through repentance and good deeds. The destruction, though devastating, became the soil from which a new form of Judaism would grow. The idea of divine judgment transformed into a lesson, one that spoke not of eternal punishment, but of renewal through suffering. For early Christians, meanwhile, the event became confirmation of prophecy. To them, the temple's fall marked the transition from the old covenant to the new, where God's presence no longer dwelled in stone buildings but within the hearts of believers. The destruction became a sign that faith was no longer bound to a single city or nation, it had become universal. Yet not all could accept this interpretation. For many, the memory of the temple's fall remained a wound that refused to heal. Every stone, every ruin, every charred remnant seemed to cry out with the same question: why? Why would the God who had chosen Jerusalem allow it to burn? Why would he let his own house be destroyed? These questions have never found a single answer. They linger in the prayers recited every year on Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning for the temple's destruction, when Jews across the world weep for a loss that still feels present. Even today, the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD is seen by some as more than history, it is a warning. A reminder that no empire, no nation, no people, no faith is immune to collapse when divided from within or distant from its principles. Prophecy, judgment, faith, rebellion, all intertwined in a single moment that forever changed the relationship between humanity and the divine. When the smoke cleared over Jerusalem in 70 AD, the world that emerged was not the same one that had existed before. The once proud city that had stood as the heart of faith and identity for centuries now lay silent under Roman control. Its walls torn down, its people scattered, its temple reduced to ruins. But even in defeat, Jerusalem's story did not end. The fall of the city became the beginning of a new chapter, one that would shape the religions, politics, and very soul of the world for the next 2,000 years. For the survivors, life after the destruction was a nightmare. Thousands were killed during the siege, and tens of thousands more were enslaved. Those who survived were paraded through Roman streets as spoils of war. Families were torn apart, sold into bondage, or forced to labor in foreign lands. The Jewish nation, once united under its God and temple, was now shattered, dispersed across the vast Roman Empire. It was the beginning of the diaspora, scattering of a people who would carry their faith wherever they went, often in the face of persecution and exile. Without the temple, Judaism itself had to transform. The heart of worship, the sacrifices, the priesthood, all were gone. What survived was faith, memory, and the determination to endure. Rabbis and scholars, many of them survivors of the catastrophe, gathered to preserve what they could. In places like Yavne, they began to rebuild the structure of religious life, turning worship from sacrifice to study, from offerings to prayer. Out of the ashes of the temple came the birth of Rabbinic Judaism, a faith not tied to a single place, but to the written word, the Torah, and the unbreakable covenant between God and his people. This transformation would define Jewish survival for centuries. While their homeland was gone, their identity was not. They became a people of the book, carrying their history across lands and generations. Every prayer, every ritual, every festival became an act of remembrance, a promise that even without the temple, they would never forget Jerusalem. And every year on Tisha B'Av, they mourned its loss, weeping for a city they could no longer call home but would never stop longing for. For the Romans, the destruction of Jerusalem was a symbol of triumph. The Arch of Titus was built in Rome to immortalize their victory, and the treasures of the temple were displayed as proof of the empire's power. Yet beneath that celebration lay the irony of history. The very event that Rome saw as its greatest victory became the seed of ideas and movements that would outlast the empire itself. For even as the temple burned, a new faith was rising: Christianity. To early Christians, many of whom were Jewish themselves, the destruction of the temple confirmed what they believed, that the old covenant had ended and a new spiritual era had begun. The temple, once the dwelling place of God, was no longer needed. God's presence was no longer confined to a building. It lived within the believers themselves. As Jerusalem fell, Christianity began to spread beyond its borders, carried by apostles and converts across the empire. What Rome destroyed in one city, it unwittingly unleashed across the world. The fall of Jerusalem also reshaped the landscape of power and prophecy. For centuries, people have looked to that event as a mirror of their own times, a warning of what happens when faith and unity crumble under pride, greed, or division. It became a symbol of both tragedy and resilience, a lesson in how destruction can give birth to renewal. Every empire that followed, from Byzantium to the Ottomans, from Crusaders to modern nations, would see Jerusalem not as just another city, but as a key to destiny. In the centuries that followed, Jerusalem would become the center of struggle once again. The Roman Emperor Hadrian rebuilt it as a pagan city, banning Jews from entering and renaming it Aelia Capitolina. But faith cannot be erased with new stones or new names. The memory of Jerusalem endured, carried in the prayers whispered in exile. Next year in Jerusalem, the longing for return became not just a hope but a prophecy in itself, a belief that one day the city would be restored and the presence of God would return to it. The destruction also marked a turning point for the region and for the world's religions. Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam would all look to Jerusalem as sacred ground. Each would claim its own connection to the same holy city, each interpreting its history through their faith. The ashes of 70 AD became the soil from which three great faiths would grow, each seeing in the ruins their own reflection of divine will and destiny. Even today, the echoes of that destruction are felt. The Western Wall, the last remnant of the temple complex, stands as both a symbol of loss and of hope. Pilgrims from around the world press their hands against its stones, leaving prayers in its cracks, believing that somehow those prayers travel beyond the material world to the divine. The wall endures as a fragment of what once was, a reminder of the cost of faith and the power of endurance. The legacy of 70 AD is not only written in ruins but in hearts and minds. It reshaped theology, redefined nations, and redrew the map of belief. It showed the world that power built on violence fades, but faith rooted in spirit endures. From the embers of Jerusalem rose two enduring truths, that no city is eternal, and that no destruction can erase the human longing for the divine. And though centuries have passed, the story of Jerusalem's fall still speaks, a story of prophecy, rebellion, survival, and hope. A story that began in fire but continues in faith in the prayers of those who still face toward the east, remembering a city once lost, yet never forgotten. The fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD was not just a historical tragedy, it was a turning point that reshaped civilizations, faiths, and the human understanding of endurance itself. It began as a rebellion against oppression, ignited by a people desperate to protect their faith and freedom. Yet it ended in flames, as one of the most sacred cities in the world was reduced to ashes under the might of Rome. But what followed was not silence, it was transformation. From the rubble rose two enduring legacies, a Judaism reborn through faith and scholarship, and a Christianity that spread beyond its birthplace to redefine the spiritual world. What the sword destroyed, the spirit rebuilt. The temple was gone, but belief found new homes in synagogues, in scriptures, and in the hearts of millions who carried Jerusalem with them wherever they went. Rome celebrated its victory, but time revealed a deeper truth. Empires fall, monuments crumble, but ideas endure. The story of Jerusalem became more than a memory, it became a mirror. A warning of how division, pride, and hatred can bring down even the holiest of cities. Yet also a testament to the resilience of the human soul that refuses to surrender even in the face of ruin. For centuries, Jerusalem has remained a symbol of hope, of conflict, of faith unbroken. It has been conquered, rebuilt, divided, and reclaimed, yet its spirit never fades. Every prayer whispered toward its walls, every tear shed for its loss, carries the same eternal message, that no destruction can extinguish the divine spark that binds humanity to something greater than itself. So when we look back at 70 AD, we're not just studying history, we're hearing the echo of our own struggles. Jerusalem's fall reminds us that from devastation can come renewal, from exile can come wisdom, and from ashes can rise a legacy that defies time itself. The stones of Jerusalem may have fallen, but its story stands forever, a testament to faith, survival, and the unending quest for peace in a world that still yearns for it.